in the correct manner. But it really goes to show that he is capable of those big moments. And in order to win the Junior Speed Chess Championship, you got to be a big moment player.
You certainly do, and that's a very good point to contextualize it. That I've already forgotten. Things happen so fast here in the JSCC that Raonic was the one who was dictating the action. He said, "I'm giving up my exchange. You're playing on the sides of the board. I'm taking over the center," and he did have the upper hand, at least from an initiative point of view. However, Nihal first defended well, then he himself had the advantage, couldn't make it work. And now, as we get here into game 4, I see a French defense, which means that Nihal, well, I don't know, he must be in a bad mood. He's playing the French. But in all seriousness, there's a king on f8, so not castled, but the structure favors black. White has double pawns, has the bishop pair, but it's not going to be a pair for much longer. Down goes the light square bishop, which means the f5 square is carved out for the black knight.
Yeah, and both players are taking risks here. White, because you have a long-term disadvantage, but black is taking a risk with the placement of his king. The black king could easily land itself in some trouble, and the white rook is a part of that fact. The white rook will be a contributor in making black's king miserable.
And that's why he goes for the brute force method of g4, g5.
Yeah,
but
that's a very strange move.
It gives the f5 square away permanently, and the opening of the c file only favors black here. So, well, you hear the sirens. I'm sorry it's getting loud, but it just seems like white's position needs those ambulances.
Yeah. They're not headed for India, though, but they might as well be. Because Nihal now, with the black pieces, he's caused some damage already. And his strategy of moving his king in the opening, just giving away the right to castle, is looking very good. Because that knight on f5, that knight is just everything. It's an attacking piece, it's a defensive piece, it cannot be chased away. That is the hero in Sauron's position right now.
And we typically like the bishop pair versus a knight and bishop combination. But here, the knights are flexing against this bishop. The bishop on c1, on the dark squares, it does put pressure on the h6 pawn. As you mentioned, Hammer, the knight on f5, it covers that as part of its duty from the f5 square. But then what? In the long term, black's position is definitely better because the knights can go from color complex to color complex, can sit on the light square, can go over to a dark square. And that means they can attack pieces on both colors. The bishop can only stay on its starting color, and that means the light squares are blacks for the take.
Now the question is, you've optimized your positions. You got your rooks on open files. You got your knight in a commanding defensive slash aggressive position. What's next for Sauron? And I'm going to say queen c4. I think he should go into an endgame where the long-term advantages will maybe be even more visible.
He plays king g7 because he wants to free his knight on f5. That's one of the duties by going king h7, is h6 is guarded. Queen c4...
I think he wants to double the rooks on the g file.
So start with king h7, then rook g7, rook g8?
Yeah, because in order to get the rooks working together, you need to first get the king out of the way. That's often why we castle, right? Castling is about getting the king to the side of the board, but maybe even more importantly, it's about bringing the rook from the side into the middle of the board. And because Sauron didn't castle, the rooks were not connected. He needed to get his king away so that his middle of the board. And because Sauron didn't castle, the rooks were not connected. He needed to get his king away so that his rooks could work together. And we have just seen a grandmaster plan being executed step after step. First, he thought for a while. Then he decided, okay, I have a plan. I want to get my rooks pointing down towards White's king. But in order to do so, I first need to get my king out of the way. And he just step by step executed it. And Sadvani was unable to at any point prevent that idea.
Wow, this is wonderful. I'm learning something by that plan because King G7 never crossed my mind. And now that I'm looking at it, I'm like, well, of course that makes sense. This is a wonderful position. And part of it is the idea you were talking about earlier, Queen C4 for black. Not right now, of course, A5 threatens the B6 square, but at some moment, a queen trade could be really nice, especially if the D pawn captures on C4. That frees up the D5 square for this knight to hop into. So, and well, the knight just gonna go over to C4 by itself, I guess, because now it attacks A5. It can go in there into C4, and okay, black's pieces are all working harmoniously. White's pieces discombobulated. Rook on H3. What's that doing there? There's no attack anymore, and was it covering G3 square? You already have a pawn on F2, so it does feel like black's pieces all in prime locations, and white's are just all over the place, not really working together.
Yeah, no, this has been a dominating display by Sarin, and Raunak cannot feel good about the way he's just gotten picked apart here. This is the kind of play a grandmaster, like a world-class grandmaster, would have against a kid who just did everything wrong. It's the kind of game that gets into the textbooks to illustrate how the superior player just has better placements of their pieces. And when you're a grandmaster losing a game like this, it's embarrassing. You feel like people are watching this, and I'm losing in a fashion without ever really getting an attack, without ever really having any play of my own, without ever having any threats. It's too easy for Sarin, and Sadhwani will want to make a recovery here after this game and kind of reset his mindset.
He's going to have to. And right now I see the eval bar go down, which alerts me. There's a huge tactic here. Oh, and so beautiful. Knight E3 check. That's such a cool move. Because the queen is stuck on D3 protecting the rook on B1. And if the pawn takes, then the pawn on F2 is out of the way. So that rook on G8, the open file, the queen on A2, they can team up and the queen can go to G2 with check and win this knight here. So knight E3 check is just so beautiful.
Wow. That is stunning.
Oh my!
I was like, well, he's not going to see that, is he? But yeah, he did, and it's going to win him the game.
True masterpiece. This is one of the nicest games I've seen recently. I don't care what the time control is. That was just a demolition.
It really was.